Colleagues, good morning. Please take your seats. It's wonderful to be in Bulawayo, and I was really looking forward to having this session with you this morning after our session in Harare. So we must always have a minimum of, 2-3 sessions post-budget. So after Bulawayo, I think we have to do Mutare, so my team has to find a slot for that, so that we can cover a good part of the country. Colleagues, my keynote address is really more like a response to, that's why I like the flow of this event, that we've got presenters before me who can then, say what they think about the budget, and then when I speak, literally I try to respond or highlight some of the key issues. I think that's the best way to do it. We use that format in Harare, and I think it worked very well. Rather than me presenting the budget all over again, it really should be pulling out certain critical areas, issues that the presenters have raised. Let me start with the issue raised by Ncube, the president for CZI, Matabeleland, that the regulatory costs are too high. I agree with him. I think that this is an area that we need to work on as government to really reduce the cost of doing business. I think now we are having a situation where even our regulators, whom are part of government, by the way, these are government agencies, may be collecting more than ZIMRA put together. And their costs are unavoidable. They are upfront, or else you cannot be in business. So at least with the ZIMRA, if you're paying corporate tax, you may declare a loss, then you don't pay corporate tax. So I'm not so sure that for any of these agencies, that would matter at all. If you're running at a loss, you have to pay in order to remain in business. So clearly, we have to consider this issue. And I'm pleased that there's a presentation from Mr. Ms. Banda after my presentation on these issues. If it was not initial time constrained, I'll really stick around and listen to his findings. And I'll ask Mr. Banda to give me a copy of his presentation. I'm sure that he's raising some very, very pertinent issues. On the issue of the demand for domestic currency, when we are running a high budget deficit in any country, you will end up monetizing that deficit through the issuance of treasury bills. You have to fund it somehow. And when you do that, it means that then you are going to increase money supply. An increase in money supply is likely to weaken your currency, cause currency volatility, which then spills over to inflation. So the act of running a tight budget deficit is supportive of a stable currency. So if you look at our budget deficit, we always try to live within our means. Our target is 0.4% of GDP. Even if it was our usual 1.5%, because this year, for next year, we're even tighter. Suppose it's 1.5%. Even that is still tight enough. So that should go a long way in making sure that the fiscus is not a risk to the currency. In the budget, there's pronouncement about debt restructuring. I am concerned about our interest payments on our debt, both domestic and international, and we've entered into debt restructuring arrangements and negotiations with all our creditors without exception, so that we can carry these debt service obligations within the cash flows that we have. Also, Ncube mentioned the shift in the tax base away from corporate, more towards individual, PAYE in particular. This is correct. And this is also, in essence, brings out the issue of informalization that Eddie Cross talked about, and I'll come into his presentation in a moment. This really speaks to the issue of informalization. It's of concern. It is of concern. But let me say this, this informal sector is informal to central government, to ZIMRA and NASA, but it is formal to the local authorities. Most of these informal traders do have some kind of license, hawkers license or permission to trade. If they don't have that, the municipal police will come after them. So they tend to comply with the regulatory requirements at the local level. I'm not saying all of them, but most of them. But we don't see them paying then the formal tax with the ZIMRA and so forth. And so what's really needed here is a very close collaboration between our tax collectors, Zimra, and the local authorities in really tracking down these so-called informal businesses. So we may find that actually what we're crying about, which is informality, is maybe 50% an administrative issue. It's just an administrative hitch or a coordinating hitch between a national agency and a local authorities. I think let's start there. Let's fix that. It is my job to fix that. Working with the local authorities, and we'll work hard on that. Then we come to as I say, I found these contributions from the three contributors so far very rich, so they make a good part of my conversation. I'm very comfortable to sort of respond as a way to also give an address. Now, Eddie Cross referred to, and thank you for all the comments, Eddie, referred to being in a tight spot, little room for maneuver, high demands of the budget. That is correct. That is correct. So really, it's very little room for maneuver, and yet we need to maneuver. Maneuver in the sense that the budget needs to focus on resilience. And that's what we've tried to do. Building resilience against climate shocks, against domestic shocks, against external shocks. If the budget cannot do that under these circumstances, then it has not achieved what it ought to achieve in an environment where there is increased uncertainty. So building resilience is very, very critical. Now, let's look at the issue of the expenditure pattern, where recurrent expenditure, particularly expenditure on salaries, is 55% of revenue, which I raised. We have an obligation to hard-working civil servants, so they have to get paid. But clearly, the more they take home, including our pensioners, the less is available for investment in the rest of the economy. The economy grows through investment in the main. You invest in the future. Of course, expenditure is key. You need demand for whatever is produced at that moment in time, but really, long-term investment is critical. So it's important that we need to focus on implementing this rule that salaries should not be more than 50% of revenues. And we're saying in 2025, already see a breach occurring. This is a very tough spot. That's why in the budget we've responded by proposing that there be a hiring freeze across government as a way to contain these costs, rather limit the number of individuals than limit salary growth per person, per capita. I recall the COVID time when I think in terms of operations we're down to about 40% of our civil servants working on at any point in time, and government didn't stop working, you know. It kept delivering the same level of services. I'm not saying anything by that, but there it is. So really, I think a hiring freeze is something that we can live with in government, and our service delivery will not be affected. Eddie Cross also mentioned this issue of over-taxation. Also, I've heard the comments that, Minister is over-taxing us, this economy is over-taxed. The economy is not over-taxed. Yes, there may be an issue of incidence that perhaps on the PAYE front, there's a higher incidence over there than on the corporate front. Clearly, there's an unevenness. That's a fact. But between 18 to 20% of revenue to GDP ratio, that's not an over-taxation. I mean, try Sweden or try Norway, you know. Those are much higher levels of tax to GDP ratios. So I think we will work on the issue of the incidence. I've listened carefully about even the threshold of PAYE, that perhaps we need to make some adjustments. My job is to listen, pre-budget, during budget, and also post-budget. So this is not just I'm not ticking boxes here, I'm listening very carefully. In fact, I was talking to the head of revenue here about one or two taxes already, where we think that we can accommodate the comments that I'm already hearing, just from the three speakers who have just spoken for now already. There's input that we're taking into consideration. Let me refer to the issue of, I talked about the issue of informalization, that in terms of definition, maybe what we're having is an administrative disjuncture or lack of coordination, which we should fix between the national tax collector and the local authorities. But in terms of size of the economy, Eddie Cross is correct that there's a gray hidden part of the economy, the informal sector, which needs to be counted in our GDP. Hopefully, then, as we implement some of the measures that I've highlighted, this issue be corrected. But the issue of smuggling is a problem. Whether looking at the gold sector, which is smuggled out, not necessarily in, or smuggling of goods, then that compete with the formal sector and squeezing margins for our retailers and our manufacturers. This is a real problem. That's why in the budget we responded that we need to improve the resilience of our local manufacturers by defining certain goods as smuggled. They are deemed smuggled unless proved otherwise. And we stand ready to increase the list of goods that are deemed smuggled. We're looking for a stronger verification from us government that indeed these were not smuggled. So the post-clearance audits will be stronger, they will be tougher, more stringent, just to make sure that we deal with this issue of smuggling. Earlier in the year, I even launched a drone surveillance program in Beitbridge. We're expanding it all over the country, but we know that's not even enough. As you know, currently underway, we have a blitz program to deal with smuggling. I hope none of you have been caught in that. I like their focus this time around in aggression, so you can be sure that I like what they are doing. This is my job to make sure we deal with that. So please stay on the straight and narrow. Our teams out there are pretty aggressive. We are telling them to be aggressive so that we can show that we really don't like smuggling, because it is hurting you, the formal businesses. It's just not on. I know the timing is around Christmas time. Citizens prefer a little bit of laxity from government, accommodation, but really smuggling is not a good idea as far as economic progress is concerned. And then the losses in the fuel sector, the pricing. Yes, I've also always wondered why our fuel is so expensive. Our FOB price at about 80 cents per litre before we add other government taxes and so forth. It really comes across as high. Are we not losing easily 30 or 40 cents, as Eddie Cross mentioned, through the pricing structures for that fuel? I think this is a very good question indeed. I'm not an expert in the fuel sector, but I think you raised a very important point that should be dealt with. Let me turn to you can see these presentations are so rich, they allow me to present the budget and make certain responses which are in the budget. So that's why I like this style. Then is it Harry Heresy from Nedbank? You mentioned the importance of government as an economic agent in stimulating industry, in supporting industry, creating the demand for certain products, and I agree with you. You're right that you look at the EV car industry. Government in China has been very supportive of that sector, and those companies have really benefited from that. And we as government should do the same. You recall a few years ago when I tried to introduce the idea of including members of parliament and government departments buying cars that are assembled locally. That was in 2018, right? I wasn't very popular with that suggestion. I had so many comments that, oh, Minister, these locally produced cars, they have low clearance levels, all manner of stories, but that's why we prefer the imported cars. So in the end, the issue died a slow death. But this time around, I'm determined that we invest in the local industry, support these semi-knockdown kits through the import relief measures that I've pronounced, and then reimpose duties on buses. Let's support the local industry. Let's create jobs. I think we'll all be happier to see our industry in this sector come back. But then in the rest of industry, what I propose in the budget is the fund that we used to every year allocate to IDC for retooling and so forth. will now go directly to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. For a start, I can no longer extend funding to IDC because we have now put it under the Sovereign Wealth Fund. In fact, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Mutapa, should be giving treasury money, government money, rather than the other way around. So what we should do then with that fund is to manage it directly between the Ministry of Industry and Commerce and Treasury and support certain industries. So the call that we should, Henry, that we should support industry this way is well made, and that's what the budget has proposed. Just need to check that the amount allocated is decent. Then the issue of I put 2 years for the issue of the supporting the car industry and so forth. I was just discussing here with the head of revenue, who will be happy to review that upwards. No problem at all. So that's actually a very important contribution which we've already taken on board. You'll see results when we finally do the debates in Parliament. On special economic zones, I've already listened to contributions from the first conversations in Harare, and we are going to set that aside for this year. All those proposals on special economic zones have been set aside because of the post-budget contributions. Also, there's an issue, we need to harmonize some of the SEZ rules and provisions with the ZIDA Act. We then noticed that there are certain things that needed to be sorted out, but also we want to be absolutely sure that by aligning ourselves with other countries in the region, are we not then removing our advantage over them? We're in competition. So we are really going to look at this very critical. So we've decided we need more time. So I'm going to expunge those SEZ proposals to a future date, move them to a future date, not in 2025. Then on the issue of being climate smart, the budget supporting climate, we are very serious on the climate, Henry, on this climate program, in the sense that for a start where we are continuing to support our conservation agriculture program, the presidential input program, which is a productive social protection program, but also a conservation agriculture program at the same time. That has to continue. It has delivered results for 60% of our population, that results in rural areas. We see the benefit of that. And over time, it needs to be mechanized. You can imagine the elderly, and it's mainly, and by the way, that program, the beneficiaries are mainly females. So it's 60% of those involved in Fumbuza and Twasa actually rural female farmers. So it's a very gender-oriented program. But over time, we have to mechanize it. So rather than using those holes to dig the holes, we need to buy the machines that can drill a hole into the ground. So we want to mechanize it so that it is easier for the rural women to plant their seed, dig those holes. Now, the other thing is investment in irrigation. I tell you, the number of irrigation schemes that are targeted in the budget are numerous. In fact, I wish I had the blue book here. If anyone has the blue book, then you can take a page of that. There is a lot of irrigation programs, projects that will be that will be supported by the budget. We need to get that water from the dams, which already exist, onto the fields. And we should have a situation where we stop worrying about whether there's a drought or not for maize. We've achieved it on the wheat front. So why can't we achieve it on the maize front? Where once we decide what hectarage to grow, and we're able to develop then the irrigation that's required to grow that hectarage of maize. It's doable, and the budget is trying to do that. But also what is unsaid in the budget is that, again, this year we are committed to buying our sovereign insurance from ARC. Last year we bought it. It benefited 27 districts, affected households across 27 districts, and that's a lot. We worked with WFP and other external NGOs. Then on insurance, farmer insurance specifically, we ran a pilot survey last year in the Goromonzi district for about 2,000 farmers who each paid an insurance premium of $15 US. And then they had a crop loss of about 22%. So we were then able to pay them an insurance payout rather than the full $300 that we had promised them. We paid them $65 US. It's still good money. You invest $15 US in terms of an insurance premium, and you get $65 US back at the end of the year. It's still a good deal. So we've got good experts who have really analyzed this, and we believe that it ought to be spread around the country. So we're going to spread it around different provinces, and we still need to deal with the livestock insurance aspect. We're working on that. It's not so straightforward. We found it easier with the crops, by the way, crop losses. But we're now dealing with livestock because this part of the country, Matabeleland, south, north, is mainly Midlands, part of Masingo, is a livestock country. Then I've talked about retooling, and then your ideas about financial devolution are well made. Colleagues, I've tried to use the comments to give a presentation on the budget, but I still want to add more comments. Let me go back to the global economy. I think there were some slides. I'll just run through the story. So you notice that the global economy continues to be turbid. Growth of the order of 3.2%. The high growth country is really India. China is slowing down. In fact, we have a phenomenon now where the bond yields in the Chinese economy have dropped below the Japanese bond yields. That's really, really an unusual moment in our history. In fact, there are a few analysts, global analysts, who are now using the phrase, the Japanization of the Chinese economy. And that's not a good thing for us who produce commodities, hard commodities in the main. You will see there's some slides here with commodity prices. Just move on to the slides with palladium and rhodium and all of that. These prices, I wish I had a pointer. You can see gold is streaming away. Eddie, you can see the gold prices roaring. This is fantastic, and we need to really maximize it. But look at the price of lithium hydroxide. That is, this is only from 2023, right? It is, my goodness, that's a very sharp drop. If you look at the price of platinum, palladium in the middle, again, you see the upticks in 2022 and then down. This is palladium. And platinum has been flat since 2017, normal moment. Nickel, you can see the spike in 2022 and again that sharp drop in 2024. Similar situation with rhodium. Crude oil, we want this to go down because we're a net importer of crude oil, but it's behaving like gold, it's going up. But the issue is, once you have a slowdown in an economy such as China, that's not good for us. We always want a strong Chinese economy as a commodity exporter. So really that's how but there's a Trump effect. So we hope that the Trump effect will also give impetus to the US economy at least, but beware of import tariffs already on Mexico, Canada. President Trump has promised tariffs that will go up. That may again be hurtful to the global economy. So we'll see what the balance comes out at. Then in terms of our own growth, of course I've said that domestically, our economy will recover to a 6% rate of growth next year, up from 2% this year. But the rains again are already showing a very strange pattern even for that. And part of our assumptions are that we have a better rainy season. But what I did in the budget, there's a very interesting section that people never read. There's a section where we stress test the budget and the economy. We run scenarios and say, suppose GDP growth is 2% lower than predicted. What will happen? So we already have a scenario in the budget where if the growth turned out to be lower, a certain scenario then will then pan out. You just look out for it. If I had been copied with me, I would have told you the page that you can go straight there. So we're prepared in terms of understanding what could go wrong. But we expect a recovery into next year, and all the recovery will be driven by agriculture at the end of the day, because that's what drove the downturn this year. Really, we're expecting recovery in that sector. For what it's worth, you can see behind me that we say we had a growth rate of minus 15%, that's the prediction. And next year, 2025, we expect a turnaround of 12.8% in growth. All the other sectors are showing positive rates of growth, especially from ICT and then from the food and beverages, as well as the tourism sectors. The next slide, please. I wanted to proudly show everybody our composite index. This one, that your researchers in Treasury and the Reserve Bank have been busy. We have created what is called the composite economic activity index, which is produced monthly as a way to have a more frequent source of data for economic activity, more frequent than GDP. Because we've done very well. Now we're able to produce quarterly GDP. We couldn't do this 2 years ago. After a year ago, now we can do quarterly GDP. Now we've moved to a monthly indicator. This is helpful for monetary policy. It does capture the trend reasonably well. I'm now watching the time. Now, looking at some of the measures, looking at some of the exports, import situation, I know that imports could be higher at the cross, wait not for the leakages in the gold sector, for example. But in terms of the outlook, this is a good picture. Again, we should expect a current account surplus in 2024 and 2025, which is a combination of the growth in exports versus imports, plus our remittances. Our remittances remain strong, 2.5 billion per annum. So again, we don't expect the external sector to be a risk to the currency. This is why when you look at our fundamentals, you end up saying, what's really going on with our currency? Current account looks okay, fiscus looks okay, monetary policy, in fact, is very tight right now, as I'm hearing from the industrialists. They say, but anyway, ZIG is stable, which is great, but really the fundamentals are strong, and we know what to do. Now, as I said, in terms of the budget framework, we expect the budget deficit for 2024 to be 0.4% of GDP. So it's well within what you call a balanced budget or financial prudence of the best kind. Let me see what else I want to talk about. Maybe then talk about the issues around some of the tax measures, which I know you will discuss. That's where I should go. Trying to find a good slide to start from. I don't know what slide this is number. After the vote allocations, but even vote allocations, we tried hard to stick to some of the conventions that we've signed up to. For example, for agriculture, our budget allocation is 11% of budget. The Maputo target is 10%. For the education sector, the Dakar target is 20%. We're already at 20% for primary and secondary education. If you add another 5% from higher education, we're at 25%. We've made that target for that kind of compliance globally and for the global conversation. And then for the health sector, we are 13%. We are 2% shy of the Abuja target. But I did agree, after a very tough debate with the members of parliament last Thursday, that I add another 500 million ZIG to the Ministry of Health. So I just pushed that about 13% to more like 14% of revenue. So we're only 1% shy. But look, that's also a ministry that will be receiving something like $100 million from abroad through the Gavi Fund, PEPFAR support from the US government, as well as the Global Fund in Switzerland to support our HIV AIDS programs. So in other words, we've really been tried hard to be consistent with some of the global conventions. And then in terms of some of the revenue and tax measures, in terms of the marketable securities, We've taken again our withholding taxes lower, increase the holding period, or rather reduce the holding period requirements. We've really eased quite a bit in terms of marketable securities, and we're happy to do more. We want our stock markets to compete with the best globally. On the sugar content tax, as you know, we separated between the cordials, which is the concentrate, because our issue is what you drink, which is the diluted drink, and not the concentrated mazoa from chefs. So the concentrated mazoa should have a lower tax than the ready-to-drink beverages. So we've made that distinction, and this again was a direct response to lobby and requests from companies that produce these kind of beverages, such as Schweppes and Delta. So we do try to listen, I can assure you. Then on the green economy front, we're promoting EV cars, we've reduced the duty on EV cars, we're putting incentives on the charging infrastructure for EV cars, if it's solar, as opposed to ZESA main power. And also we introduced this carrier bag tax. In fact, in the last 2 years, I've thought of demands to ban plastic bags. And I thought, hang on, someone is surviving on this kind of business. Do you want to just wake up and then you just shut down a whole industry? Yes, we could, where the government, other governments have done that in Kenya and so forth. But I thought we should, for now, proceed by way of a tax on carrier bags to show that this is a challenge and we need to go green. And then on the betting tax, again, look, let's try to net in everybody. We think this is fair to introduce a tax on betting. Other countries have it. I noticed that actually when Zambia introduced it a few years ago, their withholding tax was 20%. They've just dropped it to 10%. So I just aligned it to what one of our neighbors is doing. Kenya is also at 10% withholding tax for betting. So we're not, therefore we're in line with the rest of the region. On fast food tax, this really is a health-oriented tax to promote healthier living. Even 1% is not a really big deal, frankly, and it's targeted at specific foods. There's a whole, it's not everything. There's a specific list, and I think this is progressive. And then we also would like to the informal sector, or what we've called the emerging sector in the budget, we'd like them to register for income tax, and we're insisting that they do so in order to improve their contribution to the budget. I've already referred to the issue of the list of deemed smuggled goods in order to deal with smuggling, frankly. We look at the list again and see if we need to increase that. I'm just trying to find some other interesting measures that are worth highlighting before I stop in a few minutes. Then maybe an interesting one is that for building societies, where there will be tax exempt in terms of corporate income on core building society activities, which is lending for housing, but will not be tax exempt for commercial banking activities. Because what we're noticing is that they are acting also as full commercial banks. And also commercial banks are now in the mortgage lending business. So you have almost what you call universal banking, but we're making that distinction to make sure that building societies also contribute their fair share on the commercial banking tax side. So colleagues, here we are. The budget was put together in an environment of very little room for maneuver, where we're really focused on building resilience for the economy. It's not so easy. Our recovery depends on the weather, the recovery of the economy, and the performance of the budget depends on that as well. And the global situation is not easy. We see opportunities, but we also see risks. But here we are. Thank you very much to the speakers who went before me, and I hope that you found my interventions and responses helpful for the conversation. And we've already taken on board 2 proposals already that have come out this morning where we'll do further fine-tuning. That's why we do these kind of sessions. Thank you very much. Let me also thank Guthrie, Daily News, for being a partner. We want this partnership to continue going forward, so that our media is involved in propagating and communicating constructive messages around our policy making. Thank you very much.